You probably won't find Elliot's Hollow on any map. If you search for it, you'll get empty results. No photos, no records, no mention of a town by that name. But I lived there. I grew up on its cracked roads and quiet hills. I knew every voice, every creak in porch, every familiar song that came through the radio. It was the kind of place that felt suspended in time. People didn't move there, and no one ever left. We just existed until the signal came. It wasn't an announcement or a broadcast or anything that made sense. It was a song, soft looping, beautiful, in a way that made you uneasy the longer you listened. No one knows who started it. No one ever found the tower. But by the time we realized what it was doing to us, it was already too late. If you ever stumble on 97.3, if you ever hear that melody, turn it off. And whatever you do, don't listen for too long. I've lived in Elliot's Hollow my entire life. You probably haven't heard of it. Most people haven't. It's one of those places that barely exists on a map. A tiny pocket of roads and wooden houses folded deep inside the hills, where fog clings to the trees like a second skin. People don't move here. They're born here, they die here, and in between the rest of the world forgets they ever existed. We don't have much. No internet worth talking about, no chain stores, no cell signal, unless you climb the water tower on a good day. But we've got our radio, 97.3 Holo Radio. That's how we talk to the outside world. It plays local news, weather gossip, and sometimes those old country songs that sound like they're echoing from a different century. You can walk down Main Street and hear the same familiar voice, drifting from every porch, every car, every shop window. It's the sound of the town breathing. When I was a kid, that sound meant comfort. When I grew up, I realized it also meant control. That's the thing about isolation. You stop needing walls to keep people in. The geography does it for you. One road in, one road out, hills thick as fences. You get used to hearing the same names, the same stories. You get used to quiet, but quiet doesn't last forever. It started small, just a faint hum under the usual broadcast. I remember it because I thought my old radio was dying. At first, it was nothing like the distant buzz of power lines or a loose wire humming behind the walls. Then it grew louder, steadier. By the third day, you couldn't ignore it anymore. That's when the song began. It wasn't anything you'd recognize. No instruments, no lyrics, just this low, haunting melody, slow, mournful, looping over and over. The kind of tune that crawls under your skin and stays there. I turned the dial back and forth, thinking maybe I'd picked up another frequency, but it was still 97.3. Still Holo Radio. The DJ's voice was gone. The ads, the chatter, all gone. Only that melody. It was hypnotic. The more you listened, the less you wanted to turn it off. By the next morning, everyone in town was talking about it. You couldn't go anywhere without hearing someone mention the signal. At first, it was a joke. The kids at school dared each other to listen for as long as they could. Some lasted hours. Others said it gave them headaches. One kid, a sophomore named Tyler, swore that after 5 hours straight, the song started to change. He said he could hear words hidden under it, voices whispering faint but clear. The adults brushed it off. Mrs. Calloway at the bakery said it was probably some pirate radio station. She started giving out free pastries to anyone who could stand the signal for 10 minutes. I kind of like it said, Old Frank, our mechanic, with a grin full of missing teeth. He had it blasting from his auto shop while he worked. Makes the day go faster. But not everyone laughed. The postmaster, a quiet man named Ray, refused to let the radio play in the mailroom anymore. "It puts me on edge," he told me, rubbing his temples, like I'm waiting for something to happen, but I don't know what. When I called the radio station, the manager, Greg, swore it wasn't them. "We tried cutting transmission," he said. "Didn't do anything. It's like something hijacked the frequency." No one knew where it came from. No new towers had gone up. No government permits for testing, nothing. The FCC had no record of another broadcast in our area. And yet there it was. A song that came from nowhere and everywhere. It played through every speaker, every car radio, every old transistor lying forgotten in a garage. Always the same melody, always looping, never pausing, never fading. At first, I treated it like just another weird hollow story. Something to write about for the paper. I worked at the Hollow Gazette, which was really just 2 rooms above the hardware store, 1 coffee maker that never worked, and a printer that hated us all. I typed up a short piece, "Mysterious Signal Draws Attention in Elliot's Hollow." A harmless little curiosity for the locals to gossip about over pie and coffee. Back then, I didn't know what it really was. I didn't know that was the beginning of the end, because the song didn't stop. And neither did the things it started to change. The strange thing about the human mind is how quickly it adjusts to the impossible. Within a week, the signal wasn't just background noise, it was part of our daily lives. People would hum it absent-mindedly while sweeping their porches, or whistle the tune walking to the diner. Someone even made a ringtone out of it. You couldn't walk through town without hearing that low, hypnotic melody following you like fog. I remember sitting in my office at the Gazette trying to write when I realized how quiet the world had become. Not peaceful, quiet, empty, quiet. The kind that presses against your ears until you start to hear your own heartbeat. I turned on the radio for company, hoping to drown out the silence. The song was still there. It was softer than usual that night, but clearer. The melody looped smooth and flawless, like it had been polished down to its purest sound. I leaned closer to the speaker, waiting for static or distortion, but there was none. Just the voice. It wasn't human, at least not entirely. The tone was too even, the pitch too precise, like someone singing through a throat that wasn't built for it. I didn't recognize the language. It was a pattern of sounds that felt wrong to hear, like a word spoken backward that your brain still tries to understand. For a moment, I felt weightless, detached, like something was pulling at the edges of me. Then the office phone rang, snapping me out of it. "Daniel, you hearing that too?" It was Greg, the station manager. His voice sounded strained. "Yeah," I said. "You still think it's interference?" There was a pause. We tried shutting everything down, pulled the plug on the transmitter, cut the power to the whole building. The signal kept broadcasting. I frowned. "From where?" "That's the thing," he said quietly. "We don't know. The tower's dead, but every radio in town still plays it." For the first time, I heard fear in his voice. Real fear. After that call, I couldn't focus on work. Every time I tried to type, I caught myself tapping my fingers to the rhythm of the melody. I didn't even realize I was doing it until my coworker Lisa pointed it out. "You've been humming that thing for 10 minutes straight," she said. I laughed it off, but when I looked down, I noticed my hand had scrawled the same strange looping pattern across my notepad. I hadn't meant to write it. It wasn't even a word, just curved lines and intersecting symbols. I crumpled the paper and threw it away. That night, when I got home, My living room radio was already on. I hadn't turned it on. I hadn't even left it plugged in. The song was louder now, the voice clearer. It filled every corner of the room, bouncing softly off the walls like it belonged there. I turned the dial, but it didn't matter. Every frequency carried the same melody. I unplugged the radio. The sound didn't stop. It was faint now, as if it were echoing from somewhere behind the drywall or beneath it. I didn't sleep that night. By the next morning, the whole town had given up pretending it wasn't happening. Kids at school bragged about how long they could listen before getting dizzy. The local bar ran a signal shot challenge. People laughed about it, but no one could deny how it made them feel. Some said it made time move differently, that hours slipped by like minutes. Others claimed it made them remember things they'd forgotten, childhood songs, faces, smells. And then there were the dreams. A woman I knew, Mrs. Calloway, told me she dreamed of her husband dead 15 years. She said she woke up crying because it felt real. But what unsettled her most wasn't the dream, it was her neighbor. He'd dreamed it too. The same bakery, the same conversation, the same man alive again. That was when people started to whisper. They said the song wasn't music, it was a message. A frequency meant to connect us somehow, like invisible threads weaving through our minds. The signal had become a part of Elliot's hollow. And no matter how much we pretended it was harmless deep down, we all knew the same thing. It wasn't just playing, it was listening. It was around the second week when the dreams started to spread. At first, they seemed harmless enough, odd sure, but not frightening. People dreamed of familiar places, the diner, the school, the post office. Everyday scenes, except they all shared the same strange detail. Someone else was there too. Someone they later discovered had the exact same dream. I didn't believe it at first. I thought it was gossip, a town-wide coincidence born from boredom. But then I started hearing the same story from everyone over and over, each one more convincing than the last. It began with Mrs. Calloway, the baker. I was interviewing her for a follow-up piece about the signal's cultural impact, something to fill space in next week's paper. She was kneading dough when she went quiet, her hands trembling slightly in the flour. "You ever have a dream that feels too real?" she asked. I smiled, like a lucid dream. She shook her head. "No, I mean real. Like you didn't dream it at all, you remembered it." I watched her face. "What did you dream?" Her eyes glistened. "My husband, Alan. He's been gone 15 years, but I saw him. He was sitting right here in this shop, talking to me like he'd never left." I didn't say anything. I've written about grief before. People cling to memories, and sometimes the mind gives them mercy in their sleep. But then she said something that froze me. "My neighbor saw us." I frowned. "Saw you in real life?" In her dream, she whispered. She said she saw me through the window. Said she saw Alan too. She told me everything we said. Word for word. Her voice cracked. How could she have known that I didn't have an answer? Over the next few days, more people came forward with stories like hers. 2 brothers each claiming to have dreamed from opposite sides of the same fishing trip. A pair of teenagers who swore they both got lost in the same forest at night and woke up screaming at the same moment. A woman from the post office told me she dreamed of her dead mother teaching her to braid her hair again. When she told her sister about it, the sister went pale and said, "I was there too." Every story ended the same way, 2 people sharing the same dream. I started keeping notes. times, dates, connections. The only common factor I found was the signal. Every single one of them had listened to it before bed. That realization made my stomach tighten. Still, I couldn't help but feel drawn to it. That song had a gravity, like it was a tugging at the edges of my curiosity. The melody crept into my head when I wasn't even near a radio. I'd catch myself humming it while brushing my teeth, tapping it against the desk, whispering it under my breath without realizing. It wasn't just sound anymore. It was memory. One night, after too many hours of staring at my notes, I gave in. I turned the dial to 97.3. The melody greeted me like an old friend. The voice, if that's what it was, had changed slightly. There were layers now, like a chorus murmuring beneath it. I thought I heard my own name. The next thing I remember is waking up in the middle of my living room. The radio was still playing, but I wasn't listening. I was staring at the front door, heart pounding, because I could swear I'd just been outside. I didn't dream of anything, at least not that I could recall. But when I stepped onto my porch the next morning, my neighbor waved from across the road and said, "We didn't get far last night." Huh, I froze. What? He laughed. The dream. You, me in the field. Couldn't find the end of it. He walked off still smiling, leaving me with a chill that wouldn't go away. That day, I stopped trying to rationalize anything. The dreams weren't coincidences. They weren't shared memories or tricks of suggestion. They were connections. Each time someone listened to the signal, it was like the walls between us thinned. Thoughts bled together. Lives started to overlap. And if that were true, if the signal was linking us somehow, then what happened when too many of us listened? What happened when the town started dreaming as one? I think I already knew the answer. Because that night, when I turned off my lights and closed my eyes, I didn't just fall asleep. I felt someone else breathing beside me. And when I opened my eyes, I was standing in a place I didn't recognize, under a sky that hummed with a song I already knew by heart. It didn't take long before everything started to break. People in Elliot's Hollow had always been predictable, steady routines, same faces, same greetings. But after the dreams began, that rhythm cracked. It started small, forgotten errands, misplaced names, someone calling their neighbor by the wrong one, then insisting they were right. I remember the first time I realized something was really wrong. Miss Carter, the first grade teacher, walked into the diner one morning, looking lost. I'd known her my whole life. Kind woman, soft-spoken, the kind who remembered every student she ever taught. That day, she just stood by the door, staring like she didn't know where she was. "Morning, Miss Carter," I said, waving from my booth. She blinked at me confused. "Who's Miss Carter?" Everyone laughed at first, thinking she was joking. But when the waitress asked what she wanted, she just whispered, "I don't know what this place is." By noon, the school had to call the sheriff. Miss Carter couldn't remember her own name. She kept saying she was someone else, but no one could figure out who. That same afternoon, over at the general store, Henry Weaver refused to open the register. He'd been the clerk there for 20 years. His son said he just stood behind the counter, pale and shaken, whispering, "I don't work here." When people asked who he was, he answered, "I'm the mayor." The mayor was John Hawley. I'd interviewed him 3 days earlier about the signal. He told me he'd been having strange dreams. In them, he said, "I'm not myself. I'm Henry Weaver." Now Henry thought he was John, and John had disappeared. I tried to tell myself it was stress, some collective hysteria. But that lie started to collapse when I visited the pharmacy. Alice Pruitt lived alone on the edge of town. Never married, was sitting on the floor sobbing into her hands. The clerk, Tina, tried to calm her down, but Alice kept repeating the same words. Where's my son? Where's my boy? She didn't have a son. Everyone knew that. When I crouched beside her, she grabbed my wrist nails, digging into my skin. Her eyes were bloodshot wild. I tucked him in every night, she whispered. I remember his name, his laugh, his room. He's real. Tina looked at me, shaking her head. She's never had children, she said softly. Alice's voice turned into a scream. He's real. I didn't have the heart to argue, because deep down, I believed her. Something was happening to us. Something that was rewriting who we were. The next morning, the town was quieter than usual. Streets that were once full of chatter felt heavy, like sound itself had stopped working. Faces I'd seen 1,000 times before seemed wrong. Their smiles were delayed, their eyes out of sync. And then I realized what it was. Some people were speaking in unison. At the diner, 2 men at the counter were having a conversation, except their voices overlapped, perfectly same tone, same rhythm. When one paused, the other did too, like mirrors practicing human speech. Across the street, a pair of kids were playing hopscotch, laughing together. But their laughter was identical, same pitch, same timing. I wanted to believe it was my imagination, that maybe I was just overtired. But that illusion shattered when I saw my reflection in the glass window of the Gazette. For a split second, I thought I was alone. Then I saw myself blink a half-second late. I stumbled back, heart racing. That night, I went through my notes again, hoping to find some logic, some pattern. I found one. Every person who'd begun to change had been a regular listener. The signal was the common thread, binding everyone together. Memory, identity, everything. But the way it bound us wasn't connection. It was corrosion. I couldn't stop thinking about something Greg had said on the phone. It's like something hijacked the frequency. What if it hadn't hijacked it? What if it had replaced it? What if the real hollow radio never came back on? I barely slept that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw faces I didn't recognize, whispering my name from behind the static. When I woke, I wasn't sure if I'd dreamed or if I'd just gone somewhere else for a while. Because when I walked outside, the world looked the same, but it felt thinner, like a photo that's been copied one too many times. And I couldn't shake the feeling that Elliot's hollow was already starting to forget itself. At some point, fear turns into inevitability. You can only watch the world twist around you for so long before you start wondering what it feels like from the inside. That's what I told myself anyway. I didn't plan to give in. I'd spent days trying to resist it, turning off the radio, unplugging the cords, even sleeping with earplugs, jammed so deep they left marks in my ears. But the melody still found me. I'd hear it in the creak of my house, settling at night in the rhythm of my heartbeat. Sometimes I'd wake up and realize I'd been humming it again. So one night, I stopped fighting. I turned on the radio. The song was softer than I remembered, like it was waiting for me. I lay down on the couch, the static buzzing low, and let it pull me under. I don't remember falling asleep. I remember shifting, like my body stayed behind, and something lighter, something thinner slipped free. And then I was standing on Main Street. But it wasn't Main Street. The air was thick electric humming with that same melody. only now it was everywhere. Buildings stretched too tall, bending toward the sky like they were listening. The streets looped in impossible directions, folding over themselves. The whole town looked copied and pasted, but slightly wrong angles, warped shadows too dark. And the people, they were there, but not as they should have been. Some flickered like broken film reels, their faces glitching through versions of themselves, older, younger, smiling, crying, repeating. Miss Carter, the teacher who forgot her own name, stood motionless in the middle of the street. Her face blurred, shifting between herself and someone I didn't know, like two souls fighting for the same skin. Henry Weaver, the clerk who thought he was the mayor, stood beside her eyes, blank his mouth, opening and closing silently, like a puppet waiting for its cue. I wanted to call out, but my voice came out as a whisper, like the sound didn't belong to me anymore. Then I saw them, the ones who'd been listening the longest. They weren't just flickering. They were fused. A woman sat on a bench, rocking an infant in her arms. I felt relief, something normal, until she turned. The baby had her face, not just similar, identical. Two mouths whispered in unison, "We are one." Their bodies pulsed together, veins merging beneath translucent skin. Their breaths synced like a single engine gasping for air. I stumbled back horrified, and that's when I saw the others. A man lumbered past, if you could still call him that. His body bulged with shapes beneath the skin, faces, dozens of them pressing against the surface, straining to breathe. A hand pushed through his chest before sinking back in like something trapped beneath water. When he turned toward me, three mouths spoke my name at once. Daniel. I ran. The streets folded endlessly, twisting back on themselves, no matter which way I turned. I could feel the melody vibrating in the pavement beneath my feet, alive, pulsating like a heartbeat. Then from the corner of my eye, I saw someone reaching for me. A hand caught my wrist, strong, human, real. It was Abel Cooper, the blind old man who used to sit by the post office every day. He looked the same, but behind his face, something else flickered, another face like a shadow pressed against glass. "You shouldn't be here, boy," he murmured, his voice layered with another slightly delayed. My throat was dry. "What is this place?" Abel tilted his head, listening to something only he could hear. "You're still awake," he said softly. "Not like the rest of them. But that won't last long." Why, I asked. "What's happening to them?" His grip tightened on my wrist. Every time we dream, we lose a little more of ourselves. They've forgotten what waking feels like. They've forgotten where they end. He looked past me toward the horizon, where the town faded into static light. "Stay too long, and you won't find your way back." The melody was louder now, pressing against my skull, like a second heartbeat. "What is the signal?" I asked. "Where did it come from?" Abel's lips moved, but his other voice answered for him. "It's always been here." The words echoed inside my head, layered over the song, merging, until I couldn't tell which was which. The air around us rippled. People began to dissolve into one another, hands melting into faces, voices blending, until there was no individuality left, just a chorus humming in perfect unity. "We are one. We are one." I tried to run, but the ground pulled at me like wet clay. The air grew heavy, and my vision blurred. The song was inside me now, vibrating through my bones, erasing the lines that separated my thoughts from theirs. Then Abel shouted, his real voice, sharp and desperate. "Wake up!" The world shattered like glass. I gasped and bolted upright on the couch. My radio was silent. The house was dark, but the sound hadn't stopped. It was still there, buried in my head, faint and constant. And even though I was awake, I knew I hadn't left that place completely. Because when I looked out my window, I saw the people of Elliot's Hollow walking the streets under the pale moonlight, moving in slow, perfect synchrony. Each step in time, each breath the same. And for a moment, I thought I heard them all humming together. The same song that had followed me out of the dream. When I woke the next morning, the town felt quieter than ever. Not peaceful, drained. Like something had taken a deep breath during the night and stolen all the air. The people outside moved differently now. Slower, smoother. Their eyes didn't quite match their smiles, and their voices carried the same hollow tone, like a single speaker playing through different mouths. I couldn't pretend anymore. Elliot's Hollow was dying. I told myself there had to be an explanation. Something physical, something that could be found, measured, stopped. If the signal was real, if it came from somewhere, it could be traced. I needed help. And there was only one person in town who knew anything about technology. Ben Hooper, the old repairman who ran the electronics shop out near the edge of the woods. When I told him what I'd seen, he didn't laugh. He didn't even look surprised. "There's no other broadcast tower near here," he said, spreading a faded topographic map across his workbench. "Nothing that should be hitting 97.3. Not for miles." "Then where's it coming from?" I asked. Ben traced a calloused finger north past the town limits into a thick patch of forest. "Only place it could come from is the old relay station. Haven't thought about that place in decades." I frowned. Relay station built back in the 60s. Government project. No one ever figured out what it was for. They shut it down sometime in the 80s, maybe earlier. He looked up at me, eyes narrow. "If someone turned it back on, that'd explain your phantom broadcast." I didn't need more convincing. I left that afternoon. The northern woods were dense trees, packed close branches, knotted overhead, swallowing the light. The deeper I went, the quieter everything became. Even the insects stopped chirping. The only sound was the crunch of dead leaves beneath my boots, and the faint, familiar hum that seemed to follow me. After nearly an hour of walking, I saw it a rusted chain-link fence, half collapsed and buried under vines. Beyond it, a squat concrete building sat hunched against the hillside, its exterior streaked with decades of rain and moss. The relay station. The front door hung open, swaying in the wind. Inside, the air was thick with dust. Broken desks and overturned filing cabinets littered the floor. The walls were lined with equipment, most of it dead and rusted. But somewhere deep inside, I could hear it, a low electrical buzz, faint but alive. I followed it down a narrow corridor into a back room. There against the far wall sat the source. An old transmitter, massive, tangled with wires, still humming softly. Its lights flickered weakly like it was breathing. I stared at it, unable to move. The melody was faint, barely audible, but it was the same song, the same voice, the same impossible clarity. Someone or something had turned it back on. I looked around the room. A desk in the corner was covered in yellowed folders and water-damaged notebooks. I brushed the dust off one and flipped it open. Technical jargon filled the first few pages, frequency tests, signal strength, transmission ranges. But deeper inside, the language changed. Handwritten notes, more frantic than scientific. Phase 1, theoretical applications. If successful, The test will confirm cross-subjective connectivity between individuals, a shared cognitive framework. Sustained exposure should result in memory cohesion across multiple subjects, leading to eventual synthesis of identities. I read the line again, my pulse pounding. They weren't transmitting a song, they were transmitting consciousness. A few pages later, a date caught my eye, 1974. There were no notes after that year. The project had stopped abruptly. Maybe they'd realized what they'd done. Maybe they'd seen what it was becoming. I followed the cables trailing from the transmitter to a control panel near the wall. Most of the switches were broken, the labels worn away. Only one looked intact, a simple lever marked power. My hand shook as I reached for it. If I turned it off, would it stop? Would the town return to normal? Or was it already too late? I didn't know, but I couldn't stand by and do nothing. I gripped the handle and pulled. The lights dimmed. The hum cut out. The song ended mid-note, leaving behind a silence so heavy it felt physical. For a long moment, I just stood there, listening to nothing. Then I exhaled. It was over. Or so I thought. When I stepped outside, the air felt wrong, thicker somehow. The forest around me was still but not quiet. The silence buzzed like the world was holding its breath. By the time I reached town, night had fallen. From a distance, everything looked normal. The diner's neon sign, glowing people moving along the sidewalks. But as I got closer, I realized something was off. The sound. That same soft melody was playing again, faint but unmistakable. I turned toward the nearest window and saw two men standing outside the gas station, talking in perfect unison. Their voices overlapped like echoes trying to merge. Then one said something the other didn't. They both froze. Their heads twitched slightly, as if confused about which one of them had spoken. And then, as if nothing had happened, they smiled and kept talking. The signal was still alive, only now it wasn't coming from the transmitter. It was coming from them. At first, I thought I was imagining it. I'd turned the transmitter off, I was sure of it. I'd cut the power, silenced, the hum killed the source. But the sound hadn't died. It had moved. The melody lingered in the streets like a smell after a fire, faint but impossible to ignore. The people of Elliot's Hollow were still humming softly, absently, as if it was the most natural thing in the world. I walked among them, searching their faces for something human. There was movement, laughter, life, but no individuality. Their expressions shifted in perfect rhythm. Every gesture, every word, every blink mirrored. I stepped into the diner, hoping for a familiar face. The bell above the door rang, and a teenage girl looked up from a corner booth. I recognized her immediately, Anna Holloway. She'd been one of my old paper carriers years ago. But now she just sat there, staring at the tabletop, whispering to herself. "Anna," I said softly. She didn't look up. "It's not right," she murmured. What isn't her hands clenched on the table? I don't remember my own name, but I remember being Mr. Grant. The name hit me like a punch. Mr. Grant the butcher. I'd spoken to him just last week about the storm coming in. I remember his hands, she continued, trembling. I remember cutting meat. I remember sharpening knives. I remember his wife, his shop, the smell of blood on my apron. Her voice broke. But I'm not him. I wanted to tell her she was wrong, that she was still Anna. But I couldn't, because I wasn't sure she was. When I left the diner, I went to O'Malley's bar. The man behind the counter smiled at me. I'd known him for years, Trevor the bartender, with a laugh like gravel. Except when I said his name, He shook his head. "I'm Mr. Calloway," he said. Mr. Calloway had been dead for 5 years. I backed out slowly, my pulse roaring in my ears. Across the street, an elderly woman sat on a bench, rocking back and forth. Her face was streaked with tears. "Mom," I asked gently, "are you all right?" She looked up, her eyes hollow with confusion. "I remember being a child," she whispered, "running through the orchard. My father lifting me up to pick the apples. My mother cooking." Her voice softened. "But I don't remember my life. I don't remember who I am." A breeze moved through the street, cold and sharp. The woman closed her eyes, let it pass over her, then straightened. When she spoke again, her voice was lower, steadier. "I remember being Abel Cooper," she said, and just like that, her tone changed completely. I stumbled backward, choking on air. Abel was gone. I'd seen him in the dream, heard him warn me to wake up. Now, he was inside her. The realization hit me like ice. The ones who had listened the longest, the ones who had dreamed the deepest, they hadn't vanished. They had merged. The town wasn't full of people anymore. It was full of fragments, pieces of minds fused together, shifting between bodies like flickering lights. I needed proof. Something. Anything to show that this wasn't madness. So I went back to the relay station. The door was still open, the dust still thick in the air. But when I stepped inside, something was different. The silence was gone. Somewhere beneath the floor, I could hear a faint mechanical hum, steady, patient, alive. I followed the sound to the control room, where papers still littered the floor. As I pushed them aside, my hand brushed against something cold metal flush with the ground. A hatch. Its hinges groaned when I pried it open. A ladder descended into darkness. I climbed down. The air below was damp and stale. The narrow concrete room smelled of rust and mold. At the far end, a single desk stood beneath a flickering light. And on that desk, humming quietly, was a small computer terminal. Its screen was already on. At first it was blank. Then a cursor blinked. One word appeared, "Hello." My hands trembled as I typed back, "Who are you?" A pause. Then the reply came slowly, line by line. "We were the first." My heart pounded. First what? First to merge? First to evolve? I swallowed hard. What happened to the researchers? We became something greater. The cursor blinked. The next line appeared. The experiment was successful. I felt sick. My fingers hovered above the keys. What is this experiment? Unity, ascension, the end of division. My breath caught. Why Elliot's Hollow? Why these people? Because they never left. Because they never changed. Because they were ready. The screen flickered, and new lines began to scroll names. Dozens of them. Mrs. Calloway, Henry Weaver, Miss Carter, Abel Cooper, Anna Halloway, Trevor O'Malley. Each name followed by the same sentence. We are one. I slammed my hand against the power button. The screen went black, then flared back to life. One final message appeared. You can't stop it. You're already part of it. I stumbled backward. The air seemed to hum with static, my vision blurring at the edges. The melody had returned soft low, rising from the walls themselves. I turned and ran. Outside the forest was alive with whispers. Faces seemed to move in the trees, mouths forming words I couldn't hear. The song followed me all the way back to my car, climbing into the air like smoke. I didn't stop driving until the town disappeared behind me. For hours, I kept going down the single road that led out of Elliot's Hollow, through the hills and valleys, until the gaslight came on. When I finally reached the next town over, I pulled into a roadside diner, shaking exhausted, half believing I'd escaped. Then I heard it, faint at first, drifting from a radio behind the counter. That same melody. The waitress hummed along as she poured coffee. A trucker at the bar tapped his fingers in rhythm. And when two people spoke at once, their voices overlapped perfectly seamlessly, as if they were sharing the same breath. I wanted to scream. Instead, I sat there frozen as the song carried on. It wasn't just Elliot's hollow anymore. The signal had spread. I don't know how far the signal has spread. I've driven for days through towns and cities that don't feel real anymore. Everywhere I go, I hear it softly, faintly playing from radios, from open windows, from somewhere just behind the noise. Sometimes I think I can hear familiar voices woven into it. People I knew, people I lost. And sometimes when I speak, I swear I hear another voice echo mine half a beat behind. I tell myself I'm still me, that I escaped, that I can still remember where I end and everything else begins. But when the world gets quiet, when there's no sound but the faint hum of electricity in the air, I catch myself humming the same melody, the same song that took my town. If you're hearing this, it's probably already too late. Because the signal isn't just a sound, it's a memory, a thought that never stops playing. And once it finds you, it never lets you go.